Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close-Up, lawmakers wrap up a busy funnel week. Dozens of bills sped through committee to keep them alive past the do-or-die deadline.
And many of those bills are fairly controversial, from gender identity education in schools to banning certain books from school libraries. We'll hear from Republican Brad Zahn, Democrat Jennifer Conforst about the proposals that survived funnel week and those that didn't.
This is Iowa's news leader. This is KCCI 8 News Close-Up.
And good morning and welcome to Close Up. I'm Chief Investigative Reporter James Stratton.
And I'm Chief Political Reporter Amanda Rooker. Thanks for joining us. Now, the Iowa legislature made it through a major deadline last Friday, the first funnel week of the 2023 session.
That means most bills that didn't pass at least one full committee are likely dead for the session, but there are some exceptions to that rule. Lawmakers scrambled to get as many of those bills through committee as possible. That includes prohibiting students from using school bathrooms that don't correspond with their biological sex, including transgender students, expanding the kinds of jobs children between 13 and 17 years old can have, and putting new restrictions on the use of eminent domain for private pipeline projects, along with a ban on any gender identity instruction from kindergarten through third grade or kindergarten through fifth grade in another bill that lived.
Talking about all of those bills, I'm joined now by Iowa Senate President pro tempore, Republican Brad Zahn. Senator, thanks for joining us today.
It's awesome to be with you and James.
Well, talking about this busy funnel week, now that the deadline has officially passed, we have a lot less bills on the table. That means a narrower focus for you and your colleagues. Where do you see that focus heading for the rest of session?
Well, it's always good when we go through that first funnel. As maybe a lot of Iowans don't know, there are so many bills that are filed that go nowhere. And so I'm really excited. You know, now really we zone in on what our priorities are, and I think there's some great bills that did survive the funnel.
Talking about some of those bills that did survive the funnel, and even kind of rewinding first a little bit, last session we talked so much about parents' rights and about obscene content in schools. We're talking about it again this session, and we saw so many bills surrounding that, including the governor's education bill. Do you think this is finally the year that we're going to see some sort of agreement between the House, the Senate, and the governor on that?
Well, I'm hopeful. I mean, this is, you know, it takes a lot of time and efforts to get an agreement with all three different parties. And so I feel very confident that we're going to get some legislation done to get the parents back at the table, and so they're being heard of, which has been a lot of frustration with a lot of parents that are out there.
And where do you see kind of the compromises or the negotiations going? We're seeing kindergarten through third grade over in the House. We're seeing kindergarten through fifth grade or sixth grade in the Senate. When we're talking about the age ranges that won't be discussing gender identity or sexual activity in the classroom. We're also talking about different types of restrictions on books in the classroom. What do you see as the correct path forward?
Well, I think that in the Senate, I support the idea of allowing parents to make sure that they get the ability to see what's being taught. You know, what happened is COVID happened, and a lot of parents were starting to pay attention as their students were doing the online instruction. So I'm really excited that we're gonna come up with something. I don't know where that's going to be. You said sixth grade or third grade or whatever that is. You know, I just want, as an employer and someone that's in small business, I want them to concentrate on reading, writing, math, science, STEM. And you know, I think that some of the reason why these conversations are being had down at the Capitol is so many parents don't feel like they're being listened to when they go to various school boards. We've got great school districts out there, but there's some that I don't think they're listening to their parents. And so unfortunately, the legislature has to get involved. I just really think that a lot of those conversations need to be done at home with the parents.
Another bill that moved forward during funnel week was a bill that would ban Iowa kids from receiving gender transition procedures. When we're talking about this push for parents' rights, why do parents have the final say over their child's education, but they don't have the final say over their child's health care when it comes to puberty blockers, hormone therapies, those types of procedures?
Well, I think this, and there was just an article here not too long ago that I read from someone that was actually a nurse that was participating in some of these surgeries. And you know, our concern is that we don't think a child is old enough to make those decisions. And we've seen a lot of problems with some of those transitions with certain individuals where the suicide rates are higher. But most importantly, I just think that it's just, to me, it is unhealthy to have those children go through those. Where right now they can't get a tattoo till they're 18 years old. They can't buy liquor or cigarettes until they're 21 years of age. And the list goes on and on. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect children is what we're trying to do. And their adolescence, and as we all know, based on science, that the brain is not fully formed until they get into their, mid-20s. And so, to me, it's just common sense is what it is. And I fully support that we would have that conversation based on some of the science and some of the data that I've seen in regards to some adults. I just talked to a really good friend of ours who are gay, and he told me that, listen, he says when he was younger, he's got all sisters, that he kind of thought he liked to play with, Barbies or whatever that was, that he thought that maybe I wanted, at that time. But now he is for sure, he knows that if he had done something at that age, that he would have made a mistake and he would have regretted that.
And so that's the reasoning behind.
Well, I'm just giving you a personal story that someone called me about. They're very good friends of ours. And he just told me that. And I just don't think that a child their brain is mature enough. And I think that those decisions, once they get past the age of 18, then it's up to them. They're a legal adult. But we're trying to protect children while we're having this conversation.
Talking about protecting children, how do you balance that thought process with also the mental health aspect around all of this? I know there was an emotional moment during the Senate Education Committee this past week where Senator Donahue brought up a transgender teenager who she said in part committed suicide this past week in part due to some of these LGBTQ bills being brought up at the State House. When Democrats talk about bills like these increasing the likelihood of teens to commit suicide, what's your response to that?
Well, I wasn't at that committee, so I don't know what all the details were. Listen, the bottom line here is we're trying to protect children, but most importantly, we're allowing parents to decide what is best interest for their kids.
Well, we will continue to talk about mental health, a lot of these LGBTQ bills, and the other things coming up after the break. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, welcome back to Close Up. We are continuing our conversation with Republican Senate President Pro Tem Brad Zaun. We're talking about Funnel Week and the bills that did make it through committee. On the House side, there was a bill that made it through to protect landowners from carbon capture pipelines. Eminent domain pipelines have been such a hot topic at the State House. Do you see action moving forward in the Senate side on that bill or similar bills?
Yeah, I'm not on the, I think that's in Commerce, I think, or state government, I can't remember, but I do see that we're gonna do something in regards to that to protect the rights of the property owners that are there. I certainly have concerns that a for-profit company is allowed to go in there and take property through eminent domain. But with that said, there's some things you need to consider, as such as there's a lot of pipelines that are out there. We have water lines, we have gas lines, we have sewer lines. So whatever we do, we got to make sure that we do it right. But I'm going to stand with the landowner in regards to this.
Another bill that made it through funnel that you're not directly involved in, but just to speak about as a Senate Republican leader, the governor's plan to reshape state government. Obviously, that's a hefty bill,
Oh, yes.
but it did move forward out of committee. What are you hearing about the next steps on that
Well,
bill?
I think the next steps is, I love the intention, and that's to, to try to run a more efficient government. I've seen some preliminary numbers that shows that it could save over $200 million in regards to what the taxpayers. I know with other states where we are at compared to other states, we have 37 departments. Obviously what the governor wants to do is go to 16 departments. I think that's a wonderful idea. The most important thing and my responsibility to taxpayers is to make sure that we're running an efficient government. And I don't know when the last time it's ever been changed, but I really think, like every business goes through, you need to look at your business model, and I think you need to reanalyze everything and see how you could run more efficiently. So I support this, but it's like grinding up sausage. I mean, there's going to definitely probably be some changes in the negotiations with the governor and the House, and I really look forward to it.
I'm talking about a bill that you are involved with,
Okay.
your bill that would reinstate the death penalty in Iowa, a bill that you've been heavily involved with. Again, would only reinstate it in the cases of kidnap, rape, and murder of a child. But there have been iterations of bringing the death penalty back that have been introduced and never made it across the finish line. Several years. What's the game plan to get this bill actually across the finish line?
Well, first of all, there's some misinformation out there that the House would just kill this bill. I have had conversations with the Judiciary Chair. I just want to say this. First of all, I am not someone that's really big on the death penalty. But with a case that happened up around the Waterloo area with Jetta Gage, with those two brothers that brutally raped this girl, the reason why I decided to file this bill is there is no stiffer penalty in regards to raping, which if you rape a child, you're going to go to jail or prison for life. And there's no stiffer penalty if you kill off your potential future witness. And so it is something that I think we do need to have a conversation on. I did hear from a family member of Jetta Gage, and she told me about some of the things that are going on in the prison, and how these two really terrible people that are in prison that raped this girl are bragging about, hey, listen, there was no stiffer penalty that I killed off the person that they were raping. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to take that incentive away to kill off your potential witness. And of course, we all agree this is a terrible crime. But like I said, I'm not someone that's really pushing on the expansion of the death penalty, but in this particular circumstance, I think it's warranted.
Well, Senator, that's all the time we have. We'll be tracking that bill and all of the other bills that made it past Funnel Week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor.
And still to come on Close Up, Democratic lawmakers oppose the list of bills targeting LGBTQ plus issues. We talk with Iowa House Minority Leader Jennifer Confirst about how her party is standing against them. Well, welcome back to Close Up. Democrats in the Iowa legislature don't have the numbers to stop legislation outright, but they have been working to try and persuade Republicans to either vote down or revise many of those controversial proposals that Amanda talked about and that we've been continuing to report on. Joined now by House Minority Leader Jennifer Comfort. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
The first question is, we've officially made it through the first funnel. That's the reason for having you on for this show. Give me your overall reactions from the Democratic side of things to how the first 2 months went in the legislature.
First 2 months of the legislature seem to be a lot about politics, not a lot about what people want in the state of Iowa. So we know for sure that we're happy that a ban on gay marriage, which was introduced this week, is gone. We're happy that that didn't make it through the funnel. We're happy that an all-out ban on abortion didn't make it through the funnel, but we're really frustrated and nervous about a lot of the legislation that did make it through that really, we think, disproportionately targets the LGBTQ community when our state has problems like rising cancer rates and mental health challenges and housing and childcare issues that we're not addressing.
We are going to go bill by bill, but I want to talk first about what you're hopeful for in the next until we get to the end of the legislative session after we've passed through funnel week number 1.
Absolutely. I'm really hopeful that we can turn the page, that we can start focusing more on what Iowans are asking us to do. Like I said, mental health, childcare, affordable housing, and addressing what everyday Iowans need, lowering costs for Iowa families, the things that Iowans care about and that we heard about during the campaign. If you looked at the Iowa legislature's docket right now, you'd think that the biggest problem facing our state was LGBTQ kids, and that's simply not the case. And so we need to focus more on what Iowans want and less on what politics play.
With a lot of those LGBTQ plus bills, it's no secret that you're the minority leader. You don't have the majority in any of the state capitol. How do you work with your Republican colleagues to either kill those bills, I assume is what you would like to do, or I guess revise them as they go forward?
You bet. So thanks for reminding me that we don't have the votes.
Sorry, yeah.
No, that's all right, James. I'm used to it. I see it every day. But what I'll tell you is that we do work with our colleagues. A lot of bills up there that pass that are controversial have bipartisan opposition and partisan support. So we know that there are Republicans who don't want these bills, and we talk with them about what the impact will be, and we do work with them behind the scenes on how to make some of these bills just a little better. And so we're having those conversations right now. For example, about gender affirming care. We're making sure that parents still have the ability to make the choice about what happens with their kid instead of having that choice taken away from them by the legislature.
And 2 bills that you mentioned at the top of this didn't make it through funnel week. One would oppose gay marriage in our state. The other would basically be a near total abortion ban. Are you encouraged that those didn't pass, or are you discouraged because they were brought up in the first place?
Can I be both? I'm certainly discouraged that they were introduced. It sends a very bad message for people who are looking to relocate to Iowa, for families who are trying to decide if they want to stay in the state. If their marriage is now at risk, then why would they stay? And we need workers in this state. Companies need workers. So these bills are bad for workforce and they're bad for Iowa. So we're frustrated when they get introduced. We are happy when they don't pass. But the phone calls I got about, will my marriage still be legal on my 2nd anniversary? These are things that Iowans shouldn't have to think about. It's been decided. Let's move on, right? And then finally, we always keep an eye out because nothing's really dead until we gavel out. And so some of these could come back as amendments. We hope not.
Those questions coming to you even though understanding that it's still legal federally?
So people in Iowa don't necessarily, people who are living their everyday lives, who work at a bank or who are, a teacher, they don't have time to figure out the difference between federal law and Iowa law. All they know is Iowa Republicans have said they don't want their marriage to be legal anymore, and they don't know what the implications are, so they're scared.
The one other bill that did go through, House Study Bill 218, would basically cut off funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion funding at our state public universities. Your reaction to that continuing?
I don't know what we're so afraid of when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why wouldn't we want to teach our college students and our coworkers the importance of bringing more voices to the table? I don't know what we're afraid of here. So I'm very opposed to this legislation. First of all, I think it's an overreach, a big government overreach into our Regents institutions. But secondly, we know that we want students to learn reading, writing, arithmetic. But as a college professor, I can tell you the things employers want my students to know the most: how to think critically, how to be part of a community. And that's what these DEI people do. And they advise a lot of businesses.
An overall, thought from a college professor, also dipping into, as we talked so much about school bills, do you feel from a Democratic side of things that we're focused too much on the human side of school and not the school side of school, if that makes sense? And I think your Republican colleagues, as a juxtaposition, would say the same thing, that you are both working towards a school side of school versus learning the human side of school.
Yeah.
If you understand what I'm
I
asking.
do. But what I would say is that I don't think it's black and white. I don't think it's either or, right? I want students who understand compassion and how to get along with each other as much as they understand how to do math and reading. How do you read a book and then not come away changed and not come away understanding the importance of compassion and human interaction? It's all intertwined. We want good citizens to graduate, and those citizens aren't just people who can do math and who know history, and we need to make sure they can still know history, but these are people who also know what it's like to live and work in a community and help make our state better. What are we afraid of when they learn that?
And we're going to continue our conversation with you. Appreciate you being here, talking about state government and the potential to shrink it. That's coming up after the break. And we're back with House Minority Leader Jennifer Comfort. Governor Reynolds' proposal to streamline state government passed through the first funnel, which shrink 37 state departments to 16. 1,600-page bill. We saw Amanda Rooker holding it on the KCCI set last week. What is your reaction that bill and the fact that it's continuing?
Yeah, well, it's a big bill. It seeks to overhaul state government, and there's nothing wrong with looking at the way state government runs. Absolutely. We're pretty concerned about a lot of portions of the bill, particularly the phrase "will serve at the pleasure of the governor" is in a lot of places in that bill, and it was rushed through pretty quickly. We could have been talking about this. A consultant came in and the state paid $1 million to have them look at this, and they brought the bill, they delivered it to us at the beginning of session and said, this is what's going to happen. We have had 8 weeks to look at this bill. They've had a year, so we thought it could have used a lot more looking into, a lot more questions. No bill that big is going to be perfect, so let's work together to try to fix it. Also want to make sure that the promises of savings are real and that that's not impacting services that Iowans expect.
I want to ask you about another big bill. That seems to be the theme in the first 2 months of session is big bills moving quickly, to put it into one sentence if I could. The ESA bill obviously was a large bill. Republicans said they were working on this for up to 3 years. Do you feel that that is the overall theme of the legislature this time around? Big bills moving quickly, and how do you, as a minority, I guess, catch up or read them as they go?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the problem, right? Is this supposed to be a collaborative process? And we're all for bipartisanship. Iowans want us to work together. It's really hard to work together when you get a bill presented to you and you're told this is what we're going to do. And there's no real place for negotiation. I think people might think that we come to the table together and we write these bills. We're not invited to those meetings. And so we have to try to catch up and read them when we get them. And our answer is what's best for Iowans? And also, what's the rush? Why do these things need to get hurried so much? We are in session until the end of April. We could have been focusing on a lot of these issues throughout the session. We didn't need to rush things this much. When you rush, you push things through without public input and without thoroughly investigating and considering the legislation. That's not how to govern.
I want to ask you, too, what you're hopeful for. I kind of did at the beginning of the session, what you're hopeful that's passed through. What do you want Iowans to know about what you're hopeful for in the next 2 months as we get to the end of April?
Again, I think that it's important that we start to work together and tackle real problems, but I'm grateful to know that there's a bill out there that's still alive for rural health access, to help families in rural Iowa get more access to health care. I'm glad there's a bill that's still alive that helps to consumers protect their data privacy a little bit more online, right? So there are some things that are going forward that we can agree on. The problem is that when we have these huge pieces of legislation that overhaul government or that change the way public education works in the state, we need to carefully consider them, and they just haven't let us do that.
Sometimes I feel like on these shows we can get too far into the weeds, and that is our job, and your job especially, to get too far into the weeds. But I want you to give me one thing that you want the average Iowan to know, maybe watching this show, flipping it on for the first time, about what we've gotten to at this point and how we're looking forward.
The one thing I would say is, so far it's been all about politics, answering to a political base, and making sure that the Republicans and the governor, help out with the campaign promises they made. Going forward, we have to start focusing on people. We have to focus on Iowans. Are we taking care of them? Are we making sure that they're free to do what they want to do with their lives? Are we helping make their lives better and bring more people to the state?
Okay, I appreciate your time coming on Close Up, and good luck in the next couple of months of session. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Amanda?
James, thank you. Well, looking ahead, the presidential campaign trail will be busy in Iowa this week. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is traveling to Davenport and Des Moines on Friday. He'll be here to promote his book, The Courage to Be Free. Most polls show DeSantis as former President Trump's biggest rival for the Republican nomination. DeSantis is expected to announce his run this spring or early this summer. Now, Trump has already announced his plans to run last year. His campaign says the former president plans to visit Davenport March 13th. And Trump's former United Nations ambassador, Nikki Haley, has also announced her run for the GOP nomination last month. Her campaign says she'll be back in Iowa March 8th through 10th to campaign in Council Bluffs, Nevada, and Clive. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on KCCI 8 News Close Up.
We hope you have a great Sunday. We'll see you back here for all that presidential coverage next Sunday.